Maria Ivanova had always considered herself an ordinary person, living an unremarkable life. She was in her late 20s with shoulder-length brown hair that she usually tied back into a neat ponytail to keep it out of the way during her shifts. At the Velvet Lounge, one of Manhattan's most upscale restaurants. The restaurant catered to New York's elite, business tycoons, celebrities, and politicians who dined there not just for the food, but also for the exclusivity it promised. Maria's job as a waitress wasn't glamorous by any means. It involved long hours on her feet, carrying heavy trays, memorizing complicated orders, and dealing with demanding customers who often treated her like part of the furniture. Despite the challenges, Maria loved her job, not because of the work itself, but because it gave her a front-row seat to a world she would otherwise never have access to. Every night she observed how these wealthy patrons interacted, their polished manners, their expensive suits and gowns, their casual conversations about million-dollar deals or exotic vacations. It fascinated her, even though she knew she could never be part of that world. Still, she dreamed big, imagining what it might feel like to step outside the constraints of her everyday reality. Maria's upbringing played a significant role in shaping who she was. Born to Ukrainian immigrant parents, she grew up speaking Russian fluently alongside English. Her father worked as a mechanic, and her mother cleaned offices to make ends meet. They had fled Ukraine before Maria was born, seeking a better life, away from political instability and economic hardship. Though they rarely talked about their past struggles, Maria understood the sacrifices they had made for her. She worked hard not just for herself, but also to honor them. Every day after her shift at the restaurant, Maria would take the subway back to her tiny apartment in Queens, where she lived alone. The walls were adorned with postcards and photographs of places she hoped to visit someday: Paris, Tokyo, Rome. But those dreams felt distant, almost impossible given her current circumstances. Most nights she fell asleep watching travel documentaries or reading books borrowed from the local library. These small escapes helped her cope with the monotony of her routine. One Friday evening, the restaurant buzzed with activity. It was peak season, and reservations had been booked solid for weeks. Maria moved swiftly between tables, balancing plates of gourmet dishes while wearing her signature polite smile. Despite the chaos, she prided herself on being attentive and efficient, qualities that earned her tips far above average. Her manager often praised her ability to handle difficult customers without losing her cool, a skill she had honed over years of practice. As the dinner rush reached its height, a man walked in who immediately caught Maria's attention. He wasn't dressed ostentatiously like some of the other patrons. In fact, his dark suit seemed understated compared to the flashy designer outfits around him. But there was something undeniably commanding about his presence. Tall and broad-shouldered, he carried himself with quiet confidence, exuding an air of authority that made people instinctively look twice. His sharp features and piercing blue eyes added to the effect, giving him an almost magnetic quality. The hostess led him to a corner table away from the crowd. Maria watched as he settled in, pulling out a stack of papers from his briefcase and spreading them across the table. Unlike many of the diners, he didn't seem interested in socializing or indulging in fine wine. Instead, he ordered an espresso and began studying the documents intently, occasionally jotting down notes in a leather-bound notebook. There was no entourage accompanying him, no signs of extravagance beyond the quality of his attire. And yet Maria couldn't shake the feeling that this man was someone important, someone whose name might appear in headlines if she cared enough to follow the news. When it was her turn to approach his table, Maria did so cautiously. She introduced herself politely, asking if he'd like anything else besides the coffee. He glanced up briefly, offering a curt nod before returning his focus to the papers. "I'm fine for now," he said, his voice deep and measured. Maria nodded and stepped back, resuming her duties elsewhere in the dining room, but something about him lingered in her mind, making her curious despite herself. About an hour later, as Maria navigated through the crowded space with a tray full of appetizers, her phone vibrated loudly in her apron pocket. Startled, she nearly dropped the tray, earning a few disapproving looks from nearby tables. Flustered, she excused herself and hurried toward the staff area, pulling out her phone. It was a call from her cousin Natasha, who still lived in Ukraine. Knowing it must be urgent, Natasha rarely called unless it was important. Maria answered, quickly, forgetting for a moment where she was. "Privet, Natasha!" she whispered, slipping into fluent Russian. "What's wrong?" Her cousin launched into an animated explanation about a family issue involving their grandmother's health. Maria listened intently, responding softly in Russian as she tried to calm Natasha down. The conversation lasted only a couple of minutes, but it felt longer given the tension in her cousin's voice. When she finally hung up, Maria realized she had spoken louder than intended. Several heads turned in her direction, including the man at the corner table. He looked up sharply, his gaze locking onto hers. For a moment, Maria froze, unsure why he seemed so focused on her. Then she remembered. She had been speaking Russian. Before she could retreat further, the man raised a hand slightly, signaling for her to come over. Heart pounding, Maria approached his table once again, this time with a mix of apprehension and curiosity. "Yes?" she asked tentatively, her accent shifting slightly as nerves took hold. "You speak Russian," he stated more than asked. His tone was neutral, but there was a flicker of interest in his eyes. Maria hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, I do. My family is from Ukraine." The man studied her for a moment, his expression unreadable. Then, to her surprise, he switched seamlessly into Russian, asking her detailed questions about her background and language proficiency. Maria responded honestly, explaining how her parents had immigrated years ago and how she had grown up speaking both languages. As they spoke, she noticed how effortlessly he conversed, his grammar impeccable and his vocabulary expansive. Whoever this man was, he clearly knew his way around the language. Their brief exchange ended abruptly when the man leaned back in his chair, seemingly satisfied with her answers. With a final nod, he handed her a sleek black business card embossed, with gold lettering. On it was written nothing but a private jet's tail number and a specific time, 8 a.m. sharp. "Be there tomorrow," he instructed, his tone leaving no room for negotiation. Then, without another word, he gathered his papers, left cash on the table, and strode out of the restaurant, disappearing into the night. Maria stood rooted to the spot, staring at the card in her hand. Her heart raced as 1,000 questions flooded her mind. Who was this man? What did he want with her? And why had he invited her, no, ordered her, to meet him on a private jet? For the rest of her shift, she found it impossible to concentrate, her thoughts consumed by the mysterious stranger and the cryptic invitation he had extended. By the time her shift ended, Maria's mind was a whirlwind of possibilities. Was this some kind of prank, a mistake, or was it something far more serious and potentially dangerous? Whatever the case, one thing was certain: she couldn't ignore it. Something inside her told her that this moment might change everything. The next morning, Maria woke up earlier than usual, her mind still buzzing with uncertainty. She stared at the business card on her bedside table, the gold lettering glinting faintly in the soft morning light streaming through her window. It felt surreal, like something out of a movie or a dream she wasn't sure she wanted to wake up from. The tail number of the private jet and the time written beneath it seemed so simple, yet they carried an air of mystery that was almost overwhelming. She tried to convince herself it was all some elaborate prank. After all, why would a man like that, a wealthy, powerful stranger, single her out? What could he possibly need from someone like her? But deep down, Maria knew this wasn't a joke. There was something about his demeanor last night, the way he carried himself, the precision in his words, that told her he didn't do anything without purpose. Still, fear gnawed at her. What if accepting his invitation led her into trouble? What if stepping onto that jet meant walking into danger? Despite her doubts, curiosity got the better of her. Maria decided she had to see where this path led. If nothing else, she reasoned, she'd have a story to tell for the rest of her life. So, after showering and dressing in her best outfit, a navy blue skirt paired with a crisp white blouse, She grabbed her passport just in case and headed to Teterboro Airport. As she approached the terminal, her heart pounded louder with each step. When she finally spotted the sleek white jet waiting on the tarmac, her breath caught in her throat. This wasn't just any plane. It was a symbol of wealth and privilege, far beyond anything she'd ever encountered. A steward greeted her warmly as she boarded, guiding her inside with a professionalism that put her slightly at ease. The interior was breathtaking. Plush leather seats, polished wood accents, and a fully stocked minibar. Viktor Volkov sat near the front, typing furiously on his laptop. He glanced up when she entered, giving her a brief nod before returning, his focus to the screen. For a moment, Maria felt awkward standing there, unsure what to do next. Should she sit? Speak? Wait for him to acknowledge her? Finally, Viktor closed his laptop and gestured for her to take a seat across from him. "You came," he said simply, his tone neutral but not unkind. Maria nodded, clutching the armrests nervously. "I wasn't sure I should," she admitted, her voice trembling slightly. Viktor studied her for a moment, his piercing blue eyes assessing her carefully. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled, a small, almost imperceptible curve of his lips. But enough to make her feel slightly less intimidated. "I needed someone who speaks fluent Russian," he explained, leaning back in his chair. "Someone who understands the culture and can navigate certain complexities." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Your accent is authentic. That's rare in New York." Maria blinked, surprised by the compliment. "But why me?" she asked, voicing the question that had been haunting her since last night. "There must be hundreds of people who fit that description." Viktor tilted his head slightly, considering her question. "Perhaps," he conceded. "But you're here now, and I trust my instincts." His confidence was disarming, making it hard for Maria to argue further. Instead, she stayed silent, waiting for him to continue. As the jet taxied down the runway and lifted off into the sky, Viktor handed her a thick folder filled with documents. "Take a look at these," he instructed. "Tell me if anything stands out." Maria hesitated, flipping open the folder cautiously. To her surprise, everything inside was written in Russian: contracts, emails, even handwritten notes scrawled in ink. It was clear Viktor hadn't exaggerated when he said he needed someone fluent in the language. Over the next hour, Maria skimmed through the pages, occasionally pointing out phrases or clauses that struck her as unusual. Viktor listened intently, nodding thoughtfully whenever she made a comment. At one point, he asked her opinion on a particular negotiation tactic mentioned in one of the emails. Maria hesitated again, unsure whether her input mattered. But Viktor pressed her gently, encouraging her to share her thoughts. "To be honest," she began slowly, "it feels a little aggressive. In my experience, Russians value subtlety and respect during negotiations. Being too direct might backfire." Viktor raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued by her insight. "Interesting," he murmured, jotting something down in his notebook. "That aligns with what I've observed, but I wanted confirmation from someone with first-hand knowledge." Their conversation continued like this throughout the flight, shifting between casual exchanges about their backgrounds and more serious discussions about the documents in front of them. Maria learned that Viktor was originally from St. Petersburg, though he had spent most of his adult life traveling the world building his business empire. He spoke fondly of Russia, but also acknowledged its challenges: political corruption, economic instability, and the constant tug-of-war between tradition and modernity. For Maria, hearing him talk about these issues felt oddly comforting. Growing up, she had often felt caught between two worlds: the Ukrainian heritage her parents cherished and the American lifestyle she had adopted. Listening to Viktor describe his own struggles with identity reminded her that she wasn't alone in feeling torn between cultures. By the time the jet began its descent into Moscow, Maria realized she had relaxed considerably. Viktor's presence, while still commanding, no longer intimidated her as much as it had initially. In fact, she found herself looking forward to whatever lay ahead, even if she didn't fully understand what that entailed. When they landed, A black SUV awaited them on the tarmac. A driver held the door open as Victor stepped out, followed closely by Maria. The cold Russian air hit her face, sharp and invigorating, reminding her of stories her mother used to tell about winters in Ukraine. As they drove through the city, Maria gazed out the window, taking in the grandeur of Red Square, the towering spires of St. Basil's Cathedral, and the endless rows of historic buildings lining the streets. It was beautiful, yes, but there was also an underlying tension in the atmosphere, a sense that something important was happening beneath the surface. Their first stop was a luxurious hotel in the heart of the city. Victor checked them in quickly, then escorted Maria to a suite overlooking the Kremlin. "Rest for a bit," he advised, handing her another set of documents. "We'll meet with our contacts later tonight. Until then, familiarize yourself with these." Maria nodded, grateful for the chance to gather her thoughts. As she settled into the plush armchair by the window, she couldn't help but marvel at how drastically her life had changed in less than 24 hours. Yesterday, she had been serving overpriced meals to strangers in a crowded restaurant. Today, she was sitting in a 5-star hotel room in Moscow, preparing for high-stakes negotiations alongside a billionaire entrepreneur. It was exhilarating and terrifying, all at once. Later that evening, Victor returned to collect her. They climbed into another car, this one driven by a different chauffeur, and headed toward a nondescript building on the outskirts of the city. Inside, they were ushered into a dimly lit conference room where several men waited, speaking quietly among themselves in rapid-fire Russian. Maria recognized one of them immediately, a prominent businessman whose face frequently appeared in international news articles. Another man introduced himself as the broker, though his real name remained unknown. The meeting began with formalities, everyone exchanging pleasantries and sipping tea served in delicate porcelain cups. But soon the conversation turned serious. Contracts were laid out on the table, terms were debated, and tensions rose as disagreements emerged. Throughout it all, Maria played her role perfectly. She translated key points, clarified misunderstandings, and offered subtle suggestions when necessary. Her fluency in both languages proved invaluable, smoothing over rough patches and ensuring the discussion remained productive. Victor watched her closely, his expression unreadable, but his body language betraying approval. By the end of the night, the group had reached a tentative agreement, thanks in large part to Maria's contributions. As they left the building, Victor placed a hand lightly on her shoulder. "You did well," he said softly, his voice tinged with genuine appreciation. "Better than I expected," Maria smiled, feeling a surge of pride despite her exhaustion. For the first time in her life, she felt truly valued, not just for her ability to serve others, but for her intelligence, her cultural understanding, and her willingness to step outside her comfort zone. Little did she know, this was only the beginning of a journey that would test her limits, challenge her beliefs, and ultimately transform her in ways she never imagined possible. The days that followed were a whirlwind for Maria, filled with meetings, negotiations, and late-night strategy sessions. Each day brought new challenges and opportunities, pulling her deeper into Victor's world, a realm of high-stakes business, dealings, political maneuvering, and intricate relationships she hadn't even known existed before now. What started as a simple request to translate documents quickly evolved into something much larger. Maria became an integral part of the team, trusted not just for her language skills but also for her sharp instincts and ability to read people. Every morning began with a briefing in their hotel suite. Victor would lay out the day's agenda, explaining who they were meeting, what was at stake, and how Maria could contribute. At first, these briefings intimidated her. The stakes felt impossibly high, and she worried about making mistakes. But Victor had a way of putting her at ease. "You're smarter than you think," he told her one morning after she voiced her concerns. "Trust yourself, and if you're unsure, ask questions." His words stuck with her, giving her the confidence to step up when needed. Over time, Maria grew more comfortable navigating this unfamiliar territory. She learned to anticipate potential roadblocks during negotiations, suggesting alternatives that aligned with both parties' interests. Her cultural insights proved invaluable, helping bridge gaps between Russian traditions and Western expectations. More than once, Victor remarked on how seamlessly she adapted, though he never let his praise go beyond professional admiration, at least not openly. Their schedule was grueling. They met with everyone from corporate executives to government officials, each encounter requiring a different approach. Some meetings took place in lavish offices adorned with crystal chandeliers and oil paintings, while others occurred in dimly lit cafes or underground clubs where secrecy reigned supreme. Through it all, Maria remained vigilant, observing body, language, tone of voice, and subtle cues that revealed far more than words ever could. One evening, after a particularly tense negotiation involving a disputed mineral mining contract, Victor suggested they grab dinner at a quiet restaurant tucked away in an old Moscow neighborhood. It was a rare moment of downtime, and Maria welcomed the chance to unwind. The restaurant was cozy, its wooden beams and flickering candlelight creating an intimate atmosphere. As they sipped borscht and shared stories over steaming plates of pelmeni, Maria noticed a softer side of Victor emerging, one she hadn't seen before. He spoke candidly about his childhood in St. Petersburg, growing up in a crumbling apartment, building with no heat during harsh winters. His father had worked long hours at a factory, often coming home too tired to talk, while his mother juggled multiple jobs to make ends meet. Despite their struggles, Victor described his parents as resilient, instilling in him a fierce determination to succeed. "They taught me that survival isn't enough," he said, his gaze distant. "You have to fight for something bigger than yourself." Maria listened intently, moved by his vulnerability. For someone so powerful, Victor carried a surprising amount of humility. She realized then that beneath his polished exterior lay a man shaped by hardship, someone who understood sacrifice and perseverance better than most. Their conversation flowed effortlessly, shifting from personal anecdotes to shared reflections on life, ambition, and the complexities of bridging cultures. By the end of the meal, Maria felt closer to him than she had expected, and perhaps more connected to herself. But not everything was smooth sailing. As the days passed, cracks began to show in Victor's carefully constructed facade. During one meeting, Maria overheard snippets of conversation between Victor and the broker that made her uneasy. Words like sanctions, smuggling, and offshore accounts floated through the air, whispered just loudly enough for her to catch. At first, she dismissed them as standard business jargon, assuming they were discussing legal loopholes common in international trade. But the more she pieced together, the clearer it became that Victor's empire operated in gray areas, places where laws bent, but didn't always break. Her suspicions reached a tipping point during a meeting with a group of oligarchs in a secluded mansion outside the city. The room was thick with cigar smoke and tension, the men arguing heatedly in hushed tones. Maria translated dutifully, though her unease grew with every passing minute. When one of the men mentioned laundering funds through shell companies, she froze mid-sentence, her heart pounding. She glanced at Victor, hoping for some sign of reassurance, but his expression remained unreadable. That night, back at the hotel, Maria confronted him. "What exactly are we doing here?" she demanded, her voice trembling despite her best efforts to stay calm. "Some of these deals, they don't seem entirely above board." Victor sighed, running a hand through his hair. He looked weary, as if carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. "Maria," he began slowly, "the world doesn't operate in black and white. Sometimes you have to navigate the gray to get things done." "But how far does that go?" she pressed. "Are we breaking laws, hurting people?" He hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "Not intentionally. Everything I do is calculated, designed to protect my interests and those of the people who rely on me. Yes, there are risks. But I've built safeguards to minimize harm." Maria wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that his intentions were noble, yet doubt lingered, gnawing at her conscience. She thought about her parents, who had always emphasized honesty and integrity. How would they feel knowing she was involved in something morally ambiguous? Could she reconcile her values with the reality of Victor's world? Despite her misgivings, Maria stayed, partly because she felt she owed Victor her loyalty. He had taken a chance on her when no one else would, but also because she couldn't deny the exhilaration of being part of something larger than herself. Every decision mattered, every action had consequences, and she found herself thriving under the pressure. Still, the ethical dilemma weighed heavily on her mind, casting a shadow over even her proudest moments. One such moment came during a pivotal negotiation with a major Russian conglomerate. The deal centered around importing rare minerals critical to advanced technology manufacturing. Both sides had dug in their heels, unwilling to budge on key terms. Tensions escalated until Maria, sensing an opportunity, stepped in. Drawing on her understanding of Eastern European customs, she proposed a compromise rooted in mutual respect rather than brute force. To everyone's surprise, including her own, the suggestion worked. The room erupted in applause, and Victor gave her a look of genuine pride. "You saved us," he said later, as they celebrated the victory with champagne in a private lounge. "I knew bringing you was the right decision." Maria smiled, but inside she felt conflicted. Had she truly saved anything or merely delayed inevitable fallout? The question haunted her as they toasted to success, the clinking of glasses echoing like a countdown to uncertainty. As the trip neared its end, Maria found herself torn between two worlds. On one hand, there was her old life. The predictable routine of waitressing, the comfort of familiarity, the simplicity of knowing exactly who she was. On the other hand, there was this new existence, thrilling and unpredictable, offering glimpses of possibilities she'd never dared to dream of. But it came at a cost: moral ambiguity, constant vigilance, and the ever-present risk of crossing lines she wasn't sure she could uncross. Then, disaster struck. Late one night, as they prepared to leave Moscow, armed authorities stormed their hotel, accusing Victor of violating international trade laws. Chaos erupted, with shouts and sirens filling the air. Victor grabbed Maria's arm, pulling her toward a hidden exit. "We need to go. Now," he urged, his voice urgent. Heart racing, Maria followed him into the shadows, leaving behind everything they had worked for. As they fled through narrow alleyways and boarded a waiting helicopter, Maria realized her life would never be the same again. Whatever happened next, one thing was certain. She was no longer just a waitress from Queens. She was part of Victor's story now. A story still unfolding, with twists and turns she couldn't yet foresee. The helicopter blades roared above them as Maria and Victor sped away from Moscow, leaving behind the chaos of flashing lights, shouting officers, and the looming threat of arrest. Maria clutched the edge of her seat tightly, her knuckles white, trying to steady her breathing. Her heart pounded in her chest, each beat echoing like a drum in the confined space of the aircraft. The world outside blurred into streaks of darkness as they ascended higher, leaving the city's glittering skyline far below. Victor sat across from her, his expression calm but focused. He had slipped back into the commanding demeanor she'd first seen at the restaurant, cool, collected, and calculating. Yet this time, there was an undercurrent of tension in his movements, a subtle shift that revealed just how precarious their situation truly was. For the first time since meeting him, Maria saw glimpses of vulnerability beneath his stoic exterior. His jaw tightened slightly as he stared out the window, and his hands rested on his knees, fingers tapping rhythmically, a rare sign of unease. For several minutes, neither of them spoke. The only sounds were the whirring of the rotors and the occasional crackle of static from the pilot's headset. Maria finally broke the silence, her voice trembling despite her best efforts to sound composed. "What happens now?" she asked, her eyes locked on Victor's face, searching for answers. He glanced at her briefly before turning his gaze back to the horizon. "We disappear," he said simply, his tone matter-of-fact. "At least for a while." "Disappear?" Maria repeated, her voice rising slightly. "Where are we going, and why were those men after you?" Victor hesitated, weighing his words carefully. Let's just say my business dealings have drawn unwanted attention. Some people don't appreciate being outmaneuvered." He paused, then added, "But it's not just about me anymore. You're involved now, whether you like it or not." Maria felt a chill run down her spine. She had suspected Victor's operations, skirted ethical boundaries, but hearing him confirm it outright sent a wave of dread crashing over her. What exactly had she gotten herself into? Was she complicit in something illegal? The questions swirled in her mind, overwhelming her already frazzled thoughts. "I didn't sign up for this," she murmured, more to herself than to him. "I thought I was helping with translations, not running from the law." "You trusted me," Victor replied evenly, his piercing blue eyes locking onto hers. "And I'm asking you to trust me again. I won't let anything happen to you." His words offered little comfort. Trust was a fragile thing, especially when weighed against fear and uncertainty. Still, Maria found herself clinging to the hope that Victor meant what he said. Despite everything, she couldn't ignore the bond they had formed over the past weeks, a connection built on shared challenges, late-night conversations, and mutual respect. Whether she liked it or not, Victor was the only person she could rely on right now. The helicopter landed hours later at a remote airstrip hidden deep within dense forest land. A sleek black car waited for them, its engine idling quietly. Without hesitation, Victor ushered Maria inside, taking care to ensure no one followed them. As they drove through winding roads shrouded in mist, Maria stared out the window, watching the trees blur past. She felt like a character in a spy thriller, caught in a web of intrigue and danger she barely understood. Their destination turned out to be a secluded cabin nestled in the countryside, miles away from any signs of civilization. It was rustic yet surprisingly comfortable, with a stone fireplace, wooden beams lining the ceiling, and large windows overlooking a serene lake. The isolation was both beautiful and terrifying. While it provided a temporary refuge, it also underscored how cut off they were from the rest of the world. Over the next few days, Victor worked tirelessly to secure their safety. He spent hours on encrypted phone calls, speaking in hushed tones about logistics, safe houses, and contingency plans. Occasionally, he would step outside to meet shadowy figures who arrived unannounced, exchanging briefcases or envelopes before disappearing into the night. Maria tried not to ask too many questions, knowing some things were better left unsaid. Instead, she busied herself exploring the cabin, reading books from the small library Victor kept, and cooking simple meals to keep her mind occupied. During quieter moments, Victor opened up to her, sharing fragments of his life she hadn't known before. He told her about the early days of building his empire, how he had started with nothing, working odd jobs and sleeping on friends' couches until he saved enough to invest in his first venture. "It wasn't easy," he admitted, his voice tinged with nostalgia. "There were times I wanted to give up, but failure wasn't an option. Not after everything my parents sacrificed." Maria listened intently, seeing a side of Victor she hadn't fully appreciated before. Beneath the polished suits and calculated decisions lay a man driven by ambition and survival instincts, honed through years of struggle. In many ways, his journey mirrored her own family's story, immigrants striving for a better future against all odds. This realization softened her judgment somewhat, though it didn't erase her concerns about the moral compromises he had made along the way. One evening, as they sat by the fire sipping tea, Maria decided to confront him directly about the nature of his business. "Victor," she began cautiously, "you said earlier that your deals have drawn attention. Can you tell me more about what that means? Are we talking about breaking laws?" Victor set his cup down, his expression unreadable. After a long pause, he nodded slowly. "Some of my ventures operate in legal gray areas," he admitted. "Not everything is black and white in international trade. Sometimes you have to bend rules to survive or thrive. But I've always been careful. My goal has never been to hurt anyone." "But isn't that what happens anyway?" Maria pressed, her voice firmer now. "When you bend rules, people get caught in the crossfire. Families lose homes. Livelihoods are destroyed. How can you justify that?" Victor sighed, rubbing his temples. You're right, it's complicated. And yes, mistakes have been made. But I've also created opportunities for thousands of people. Jobs, investments, growth. It's a balancing act, Maria. One I don't take lightly. His explanation did little to ease her conscience. While she admired his determination and resourcefulness, she couldn't reconcile those qualities with the potential harm caused by his actions. The conflict gnawed at her, keeping her awake at night as she wrestled with her feelings. As the days turned into weeks, Maria began to adjust to their new reality. She learned to navigate the delicate balance between trust and skepticism, gratitude and guilt. Victor continued to protect her, ensuring she had everything she needed to stay safe and comfortable. Yet, despite his reassurances, Maria couldn't shake the feeling that their time together was fleeting, a chapter destined to close sooner rather than later. Then one crisp morning, Victor announced they would be moving again. It's not safe here anymore, he explained, packing a duffel bag with essentials. We need to relocate to another safe house. From there, I'll arrange your return to New York. Maria froze, her heart sinking. Return to New York? Alone? Yes, Victor said firmly. Your involvement ends here. I won't drag you further into this mess. You deserve a chance to rebuild your life without looking over your shoulder. Though part of her was relieved to hear this, another part rebelled against the idea of leaving Victor behind. Over the past weeks, their bond had deepened significantly. They had shared laughter, tears, and countless moments of vulnerability. To walk away now felt like abandoning not just him, but also the version of herself she had discovered during their adventure. Are you sure this is the right decision? She asked softly, her voice laced with emotion. It's the only decision, Victor replied, his tone gentle but resolute. You've done more than I ever expected. Now it's time for you to go home. They hugged goodbye the next day, standing outside the cabin as the sun rose over the lake. Victor held her tightly, whispering words of gratitude and encouragement. Thank you for trusting me, he said, his voice thick with emotion. You've changed my life in ways I can't put into words. Tears streamed down Maria's face as she boarded the car that would take her to the airport. As the vehicle pulled away, she looked back one last time, watching Victor grow smaller and smaller until he disappeared entirely. Though their paths diverged, she knew their story wasn't truly over. It was simply paused, waiting for whatever came next. Back in New York, Maria struggled to readjust to her old life. Everything seemed dull compared to the intensity of her time with Victor. Yet she carried with her a newfound sense of purpose. Using the financial settlement Victor had arranged for her, she founded a non-profit organization dedicated to helping Eastern European immigrants adapt to life in America. Her experiences abroad gave her unique insight into the challenges faced by newcomers, fueling her passion for creating meaningful change. Late one night, as she strolled through Central Park reflecting on her journey, Maria's phone buzzed. A single text message appeared. Thank you for trusting me. You saved me more than you know. Smiling softly, Maria tucked her phone away, knowing their paths might cross again someday. Until then, she vowed to live boldly, embracing every opportunity life threw her way, with courage, resilience, and an unwavering belief in the power of trust. The months following Maria's return to New York were a whirlwind of emotions. On the surface, life seemed to have returned to normal, or as close to normal as it could be, after such an extraordinary experience. She moved out of her tiny apartment in Queens and rented a modest studio in Brooklyn, closer to the nonprofit organization she had founded. The settlement Victor provided gave her the financial stability she had always dreamed of, allowing her to focus entirely on her work without worrying about making ends meet. Yet despite these outward signs of progress, Maria couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. Every morning, as she walked to her office, she found herself replaying moments from her time with Victor, the adrenaline-fueled negotiations, the quiet dinners in Moscow, the late-night conversations by the fire in the secluded cabin. These memories felt like fragments of a dream, vivid yet intangible, leaving her yearning for clarity. Had it all been real? Or was she romanticizing what had truly been a dangerous and morally ambiguous chapter of her life? Her nonprofit, New Horizons, quickly gained traction. It offered language classes, job training programs, and cultural orientation sessions tailored specifically for Eastern European immigrants. Maria poured her heart into every aspect of the organization, drawing on her own experiences to create resources that address the unique challenges faced by newcomers. Her fluency in Russian and her understanding of both cultures became invaluable assets, helping bridge gaps between immigrant families and their new communities. Word spread fast, and soon Maria was fielding requests from across the country. Donors reached out, eager to support her mission, while volunteers signed up in droves. Despite the growing success, however, Maria often found herself working late into the night, unable to sleep. Her mind would drift back to Victor, wondering where he was and whether he was safe. She hated the uncertainty, the not knowing if he was still running or if he had managed to clear his name. Every news article about international trade scandals or corporate crackdowns made her stomach churn, fearing she might see his name among the headlines. One evening, after a particularly long day at the office, Maria decided to treat herself to dinner at a cozy cafe near Prospect Park. As she sipped her latte and nibbled on a croissant, she noticed a man sitting at a nearby table, engrossed in a newspaper. Something about him seemed familiar, his posture, the way he held his cup. But when she tried to get a better look, he turned away slightly, hiding his face behind the paper. For a split second, her heart raced, convinced it might be Victor. But as quickly as the thought came, she dismissed it. What were the chances he'd show up here, in this random cafe without warning? Still, the encounter left her unsettled. Over the next few days, Maria began noticing small things. Strange cars parked outside her building, unfamiliar faces lingering in the park where she jogged, even a missed call from an unknown number. At first, she chalked it up to paranoia, a side effect of everything she had been through. But the coincidences kept piling up, gnawing at her peace of mind. Determined to confront her fears, Maria reached out to an old friend from college who worked as a private investigator. "I need you to look into something," she said during their meeting at a quiet coffee shop. "Just check if anyone's been keeping tabs on me lately." Off the record. Her friend agreed, though he raised an eyebrow at her request. "You okay, Maria?" he asked cautiously. "This isn't like you." "I'm fine," she lied, forcing a smile. "Just being cautious." A week later, her friend called with unsettling news. "Someone's definitely watching you," he confirmed. "Not super obvious, but enough to raise red flags. You should be careful." Maria thanked him and hung up, her hands trembling. Was it Victor? Or someone else connected to his world? The question swirled in her mind, amplifying her anxiety. That night, unable to sit still, she grabbed her coat and headed out for a walk, hoping the cold air would clear her head. As she strolled along the deserted streets, she spotted a figure leaning against a lamppost ahead. Her breath caught in her throat. It was the same man from the cafe. Before she could turn around, he stepped forward, raising his hands in a gesture of surrender. "Relax, Maria," he said, his voice calm and familiar. "It's just me." "Victor?" She gasped, her eyes widening in disbelief. He looked different, less polished, more rugged, but unmistakably him. His suit was replaced by a leather jacket, and there was stubble on his face, giving him a rougher appearance. But his piercing blue eyes remained unchanged, locking onto hers with unwavering intensity. "What are you doing here?" she demanded, her voice shaking with a mix of relief and anger. "Do you have any idea how worried I've been?" "I needed to make sure you were safe," he replied, stepping closer. "And I wanted to see you one last time before I disappear completely." Maria crossed her arms, trying to steady herself. "Disappears? Again? How long are you planning to run, Victor? This isn't a life, it's limbo." He sighed, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "You think I don't know that? Every day is a gamble, Maria. But I can't stop now. Not until I settle my debts and tie up loose ends." "Loose ends?" she repeated, narrowing her eyes. "What does that mean exactly? Are people still after you?" Victor hesitated, choosing his words carefully. Let's just say some deals I made didn't sit well with certain powerful individuals, and they're not the kind of people who let things go easily. Maria shook her head, frustration bubbling to the surface. So what happens next? You keep running forever, hiding in shadows while everyone else picks up the pieces? No, he said firmly. I'm working on a plan, a way to fix everything, but it's risky, and I can't involve you anymore. Your safety depends on staying far away from my world. His words stung, but deep down, Maria knew he was right. She couldn't go back to that life no matter how much she cared about him. Still, the thought of letting him vanish again filled her with sadness. Promise me one thing, she said softly. If this plan of yours works, if you manage to come out of this alive, you'll find me. No more disappearing acts. Victor nodded, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his lips. I promise. They talked for hours that night, standing under the dim glow of streetlights, sharing stories and laughter like old friends reunited after years apart. Victor updated her on his efforts to rebuild trust within his network, explaining how he had distanced himself from questionable ventures and focused on legitimate opportunities. While he admitted it was a slow process, he sounded hopeful, more optimistic than she had ever heard him before. When dawn broke, casting golden light over the city skyline, they reluctantly parted ways. Victor handed her a sealed envelope, instructing her not to open it unless something happened to him. Consider it insurance, he said cryptically. Then, with a final hug, he disappeared into the early morning crowd, leaving Maria alone once again. In the weeks that followed, Maria threw herself into her work with renewed vigor. Knowing Victor was out there fighting for redemption gave her strength. She expanded new horizons, partnering with local businesses to create job opportunities for immigrants. Her team grew, and so did their impact. Slowly but surely, Maria began to rebuild her sense of purpose, finding joy in helping others navigate the complexities of starting over in a foreign land. Yet, Victor's absence loomed large in her thoughts. Late at night, when the city fell, silent, she would take out the envelope he had given her and trace its edges with her fingers, wondering what secrets it held. Would she ever need to open it? Or would Victor reappear one day, free from the shadows that haunted him? Despite the uncertainty, Maria refused to dwell on fear. Instead, she chose to focus on hope, for herself, for Victor, and for the countless lives she touched through her work. Whatever the future held, she vowed to face it with courage and resilience, trusting that every ending carried the seeds of a new beginning. And so Maria waited, not passively, but actively, channeling her energy into creating a brighter tomorrow for those around her. Somewhere out there, Victor was doing the same, carving a path toward freedom and forgiveness. Their stories may have diverged, but their connection remained unbroken, a bond forged in trust, tested by adversity, and strengthened by shared dreams of a better world. Months turned into a year, and Maria continued to pour her heart into new horizons. The organization had grown beyond her wildest dreams, becoming a beacon of hope for countless Eastern European immigrants in New York. Her team worked tirelessly, organizing job fairs, cultural festivals, and mentorship programs that connected newcomers with established professionals. Donations poured in from grateful families who had benefited from Maria's efforts, allowing her to expand the nonprofit's reach to other cities across the United States. Despite the success, Maria couldn't shake the feeling of unfinished business lingering in the back of her mind. The envelope Victor had given her sat untouched in the bottom drawer of her desk, a constant reminder of the unresolved chapter in her life. She often found herself staring at it, wondering what secrets it held and whether she would ever need to open it. Part of her hoped she never would. It meant Victor was safe, free from danger, living the life he deserved after years of running and rebuilding. But another part of her feared the worst, dreading the day when circumstances might force her to confront whatever lay inside. One crisp autumn morning, as golden leaves swirled in the wind outside her office window, Maria received an email that made her heart skip a beat. It was short, cryptic and unsigned. "The debt is paid. Meet me where we said goodbye." Her hands trembled as she read the message over and over, trying to decipher its meaning. Could it really be Victor? Had he finally managed to settle his affairs and clear his name? Or was this some kind of trap, a cruel twist designed to lure her back into a dangerous game? Maria debated with herself for hours, torn between excitement and caution. Finally, she decided to trust her instincts, the same instincts that had led her to board a private jet a year ago, despite her fears. If there was even the slightest chance this message came from Victor, she owed it to herself, and to him, to find out. That evening, Maria returned to the quiet street where they had last seen each other. The lamppost under which they had stood still flickered faintly, casting long shadows on the pavement. For a moment, she thought she had imagined the whole thing that Victor wouldn't show. Then, from the corner of her eye, she spotted a figure approaching, a tall man in a dark coat, his silhouette unmistakable. "Victor," she whispered, her voice barely audible. He stopped a few feet away, his expression softening as their eyes met. He looked older, more weathered, but there was a lightness about him now that hadn't been there before. His piercing blue gaze carried none of the tension or guardedness she remembered. Instead, it radiated peace. "You came," he said simply, his tone warm yet tinged with disbelief. "Of course I did," Maria replied, stepping closer. "Did you think I wouldn't?" Victor chuckled softly, shaking his head. "I wasn't sure. After everything, I didn't know if you'd want anything to do with me." Maria studied him for a moment, searching for signs of the man she had known a year ago. He seemed different, not just physically, but emotionally. There was a vulnerability in him now, a raw honesty that hadn't existed before. Whatever he had gone through during their time apart had changed him profoundly. "So what happens now?" she asked gently. "Are you free?" He nodded, exhaling deeply. "Yes. It took longer than I expected, but I've settled my debts. Both, financial and moral. I cut ties with the people who pulled me into gray areas I shouldn't have entered, and I've started fresh, focusing on ventures that actually make a difference." Maria raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Like what?" Victor smiled, clearly pleased by her curiosity. "Clean energy projects mostly. Investments in sustainable infrastructure in Eastern Europe. Things that benefit communities rather than exploit them." "That sounds amazing," she said sincerely. "I'm proud of you." His smile faltered slightly, replaced by a look of gratitude so profound it nearly brought tears to Maria's eyes. "Thank you," he murmured, "for believing in me, even when I didn't deserve it." They walked, together through the quiet streets, talking for hours about everything that had happened since their last meeting. Victor shared stories of his journey, how he had negotiated truces with former adversaries, liquidated questionable assets, and rebuilt his reputation, brick by painstaking brick. Maria listened intently, marveling at his resilience and determination. In her turn, she told him about new horizons, describing the challenges and triumphs she had experienced while growing the organization. She spoke passionately about the families she had helped, the lives she had touched, and the sense of fulfillment she had found in giving back to her community. "I couldn't have done it without you," she admitted eventually, her voice soft but earnest. "You gave me the courage to step outside my comfort zone, to dream bigger than I ever thought possible." Victor reached out, placing a hand lightly on her shoulder. "And you reminded me of who I used to be, before ambition clouded my judgment. You saved me, Maria, more than you'll ever know." As the night wore on, they found themselves standing near the edge of Prospect Park, gazing up at the stars twinkling above the city skyline. The air was cool, carrying the faint scent of fallen leaves and distant wood smoke. For the first time in what felt like forever, Maria felt truly at peace. "What are your plans now?" she asked, breaking the comfortable silence between them. Victor hesitated, then shrugged. "I don't know. Maybe travel. Reconnect with parts of my past I abandoned along the way. Start over somewhere new. Maria nodded, understanding the need for reinvention. Yet as much as she wanted to support his decision, a pang of sadness tugged at her heart. Would their paths diverge again, leaving her to wonder once more if they'd ever cross again? Sensing her unease, Victor turned to face her, his expression serious. "There's something else I need to say," he began, his voice steady but tinged with emotion. "I care about you, Maria. More than I should, probably. But I won't ask you to leave your life behind. Not for me, not for anyone. You've built something incredible here, something worth fighting for." Maria swallowed hard, her chest tightening. "And what about us?" she asked quietly. "Is there an us anymore?" Victor sighed, his gaze dropping briefly before meeting hers again. "That's up to you, if you want me to stay. If you're willing to take another chance on me, I'll be here. But only if you're sure." Tears welled up in Maria's eyes as she processed his words. This was the moment she had unconsciously waited for all these months, the opportunity to choose her future, knowing full well the risks and rewards that came with it. Her heart told her to say yes, to embrace the uncertainty and trust that love could conquer any obstacle. But her mind reminded her of the sacrifices involved, the compromises required to merge two vastly different worlds. Finally, she took a deep breath and reached for his hand, intertwining her fingers with his. "Stay," she whispered, her voice trembling with conviction. "Let's figure it out together." Relief washed over Victor's face, followed by a smile so genuine it lit up the darkness around them. "Together," he echoed, pulling her into a tight embrace. Over the following weeks, Maria and Victor navigated their new reality side by side. They rented a small apartment overlooking Central Park, blending their distinct lifestyles into a harmonious partnership. Victor became actively involved in New Horizons, using his resources and expertise to amplify its impact. Together, they launched initiatives aimed at bridging cultural divides and fostering mutual understanding between immigrant communities and their adopted homes. Their relationship wasn't without challenges. They clashed occasionally, their differing perspectives sparking heated debates. But they always found common ground, drawing strength from their shared commitment to making the world a better place. Slowly but surely, they built a life rooted in trust, respect, and unwavering support. One evening, as they strolled hand in hand through Times Square, surrounded by the vibrant energy of the city, Maria realized how far they had come. From a heated, chance encounter in a restaurant to fleeing Moscow under cover of darkness, their journey had been anything but ordinary. Yet, amidst the chaos and uncertainty, they had discovered something rare and beautiful, a connection that transcended circumstances, defied odds, and proved stronger than fear itself. As fireworks burst overhead during a holiday celebration, painting the sky with streaks of color, Victor leaned down and kissed her forehead. "To new beginnings," he murmured, his voice filled with promise. Maria smiled, leaning into him as the crowd cheered around them. "To us," she replied, her heart swelling with gratitude and hope. And in that moment, surrounded by the noise and brilliance of New York City, Maria knew they had finally found their happily ever after, not as individuals, but as partners, united by a shared vision of love, resilience, and endless possibility.